Hello everyone and welcome to the Victor Davis webinar this afternoon, Why MDM Projects Fail and How to Ensure that yours succeeds. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping before we start. The session is being recorded and we'll share a link with you afterwards so that you can watch it again if you want to, or you can share it with colleagues. Likewise, you'll also get a copy of the slides and a link that you can use to download them. And again, feel free to share those with colleagues as well. If you like the content of the webinar and you feel that there may be a group of people in your organisation who want to learn more, just talk to us afterwards about arranging a private rerun for your colleagues. We've got all the lines muted today, so if you want to ask questions as we go along, please do use the Q&A function, and our colleague Rachel is manning that today. We'll deal with questions at the end of the session, and if we run out of time before we can get to yours, we'll follow up with you separately afterwards. So I'm going to hand over now to our two presenters, Tim and Guy.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Guy Bradshaw and I lead the business development practice for Victor Davis. I'd also like to introduce my colleague Tim Williams. Tim has a specific focus on our MDM practice and will be delivering the main body of today's webinar. First, we'll take a quick look at the agenda. So I'll start with an introduction to Victor Davis. We're a new brand, but with a long heritage of data expertise that stretches back over 30 years. We'll then cover some of the basics of master data management, just so those of you who are new to the topic get to get through some of the basic concepts, and then we'll launch into the main body of the presentation, which is an exploration of the most frequent reasons that we see why MDM projects fail. With our decades of experience of delivering successful data projects, we've seen recurring themes, and it's these that we're aiming to share with you through this webinar. Critically then, we explore the practical advice of the techniques, tactics, approaches and strategies that will help ensure that your MDM project succeeds. We'll bring this to life with a couple of real-life case studies, one from Camden Council. Camden are in their 7th year of delivering real value from their master data management solution. One from a complex global consumer goods organisation whom Victor Davis is providing both strategic and technical expertise. Finally, we'll close with a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please do feel free to post them on the message board and we'll do our best to answer them. So, who are Victor Davis? As I mentioned previously, Victor Davis are a new name, but we are the result of the coming together of 5 previously existing companies, each with their own heritage and track record. You may well have heard of Entity Group from the UK and Jibes from the Netherlands. But these have been joined together with a collection of other data specialists from the Netherlands, Datadogs, Simplexa and Bloom. Entity's track record stretches back over 3 decades and features household name customers such as Toyota, Avis Budget Group, the Home Office and PwC. The result of the amalgamation is an exciting new organisation that has a compelling proposition built around 3 pillars. The 3 pillars are advisory services, where we help complex global organisations establish and execute successful data strategies. Critically, we call out digital adoption here, because what we encounter in the marketplace are often organisations who've done a lot of thinking about data strategy, may even define one. The difficulty they face is that it's not easy to deliver the changing behaviours required to actually execute this strategy. So addressing the adoption of digital initiatives is something that Victor Davis specialise in, and we have a number of practical techniques to ensure that this happens. We also possess core technical expertise which is embodied in our delivery services practice. All of the key data management disciplines are represented, including master data management, which is the focus of this webinar. Finally, we have a cloud data platform, which is a fully managed service offering, whereby we remove the complexity of managing a rich data platform on behalf of our customers. Geographically, we focus on 3 main territories of the US, the UK and Northern Europe, and this local presence is augmented by global delivery centres based in India and Mexico. For those of you who know us, you'll be aware that our customer base includes some of the largest, most complex organisations across the globe, for whom we provide a combination of advisory, delivery and managed services, all with a laser focus on their data challenges. So here's a look at our offering in a little more detail. We see the 3 practices, advisory, delivery and managed services, and our technical expertise is positioned from the 2 perspectives of foundation and utilisation. I like to think the foundation elements as the under the bonnet engine room of data management. These are the disciplines that move data around, integrate it, cleanse it, transform it and then deliver it into the utilisation layer. From there, it's possible for data consumers to leverage the insight locked within that data through disciplines such as analytics, machine learning and data science. Victor Davis possesses deep technical and implementation expertise across this entire portfolio, and we call this data craftsmanship. So now I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Tim Williams, who will take you through the detail of why master data management projects fail.
So, hello everyone, my name is Tim Williams. As Guy said there, I'm responsible for business development within MDM at Victor Davis. So, to start with, before we go into the body of this presentation, I just want to take you through what master data management is. I'm sure a lot of you have come across it before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just as a high-level overview to start with, a leading vendor has described MDM as the core process used to manage, centralize, organize, categorize, localize, synchronize, and enrich master data according to the business rules of the sales, marketing, and operational strategies of your company. So the purpose of MDM really is to do just that. Now, what are the benefits of it? It has numerous benefits. Now, one of which includes eliminating costly redundancies and duplication of effort. We see so many times that business units and departments have their own data stores and data silos that they're spending enormous amounts of time ensuring is correct in their eyes. Now, this is not productive in any way, shape, or form, and having that single view means nobody is doing the same job twice. Now, customer experience is, of course, a hugely important factor. If your customers are getting the wrong information sent to them or duplicate information sent to them, or your customer services agents don't know that they have a different account with you, for instance, they aren't going to be too happy. So having that single view means that everyone has a streamlined experience. Now, your business can be more competitive out there as well. So everyone is using analytics or wants to use analytics, but without the single view of information and that trusted view, how can your business make the correct decisions it needs to move forward? GDPR is, of course, a big concern or a big focal point for organisations in this day and age. So having to prove that you're compliant is made a lot easier by having master data management, because you can see how your data is managed, the lineage of your data, where it is stored, and know that your data is of a good quality. So hopefully you're not going to get caught out. So this leads us to our main purpose of this webinar, so why MDM projects fail. There's all sorts of reasons why this happens. Many organisations want to do MDM or launch an MDM initiative, and we've seen quite a few pitfalls that have happened over the years in all sorts of different organisations. So I'm going to run through these and also give you some practical advice on how to ensure that your projects succeed. So the first one that I want to touch on is a lack of enterprise thinking. So the realities of business mean that quite often data is defined at the business unit level, in separate businesses prior to a merger perhaps, or at product level. Now this results in siloed information strategies, siloed solutions, and siloed data. So while it's true that nobody starts from a greenfield when looking at their data from an enterprise perspective, an effort really has to be made when defining an MDM strategy to understand that the viewpoints and needs of all the key stakeholders of business systems are reflected. Now, business owners will have their own projects, their own resources, and their own budgets that will colour their perspective. In a TDWI report on Next Generation MDM, 25% of 219 respondents had more than 10 definitions of a customer, while a further 15% didn't know how many they had at all. 26% had more than 10 definitions of a product, and a further 17% didn't know. So our own experience working with multiple global enterprise MDM initiatives more than bears witness to these findings. So the examples above beg the question whether organisations perceive the customer as a customer of a department or of the whole enterprise. So this underlines the need to change the mindset of the organisation to start thinking and operating at an enterprise level to really bring that data together. So let's look at an example of customers and their data viewed as a departmental asset. So let's suppose your financial year end runs from January to December. On April the 1st, your sales team closes a 12-month services contract worth £1,000 a month with an immediate start. They receive the full amount in advance and consider it to be a £12,000 sale. The problem with that is that the figures in your finance system only show a revenue of £9,000 because both departments have different definitions of what constitutes a sale. We see this all the time. And in addition to that, you could find that the customer you signed a contract with might not necessarily be the same customer that you bill to. So having that single view of truth that MDM provides really allows you to understand the business at a deeper level and ensures reporting is correct from all sides. So as you can see here, the solution is the solution here is that a mindset change is needed company-wide. So it can't just be within a single department. You need to bring your data together at an enterprise level, and your customers and its data need to be viewed as an enterprise asset, so that a single definition of data entities is incredibly important. So the second point we see a lot of is a lack of executive sponsorship. You're going to need money, people, and the ability to change business processes, even its cultural philosophy. And the only people that can enable that are in the C-suite. So without executive support, an MDM project can't succeed. A recent study stated that 42% of respondents cited a lack of exec support as the biggest barrier facing their MDM project. So somebody at the top of the organisation must own and really care deeply about the MDM initiative, and realistically expect a significant return on investment through the implementation of any enterprise solution. I speak to an enormous amount of IT directors, CIOs, CDOs, and CTOs, and they tell me that it can be hard to get senior executive buy-in on any data management project because other board members simply aren't aware of the scale of the data challenges that the organisation faces. Data can really be a hidden problem in any business because everything seems to operate smoothly on the surface, but then that means other board members can be completely unaware of the complexities and fragilities that lie underneath it. So in order for MDM programs to be successful, they require cross-departmental thinking and organisational change, and therefore need C-level buy-in and leadership. Without the backing of senior management to make any changes across the organisation and start the process of thinking at an enterprise level, then these projects will ultimately fail. So on a number of occasions, we see organisations with a great idea, but there's no clear business case to support it. So MDM projects generally tend to compete for resources with other IT projects. So it may be that the business needs a new CRM or wants to do more analytics, and so MDM isn't seen as a priority and it gets kicked down the road and left as something we can worry about later. So unless you can really articulate the benefits of the project and they are clearly understood, it's unlikely to progress. So projects without a business case are far more likely to be cancelled or to categorised as a failure because quantifiable business outcomes aren't defined at the very start. MDM tends to be an enabler rather than directly delivering any value itself. So vendors themselves struggle to sell MDM solutions because of this. Having a single view is great, but it doesn't solve anything on its own. You need to understand the business reasons why you want or need a single view of anything to really be able to exploit it. Now, there's a number of ways that business case for MDM can be expressed. So customer satisfaction is a big one, especially as customers are becoming increasingly focused on the overall customer experience rather than blind brand loyalty. We touched on this earlier, so if your customers are getting offered the right products and that have been tailored to them, and they're going to be far more satisfied. If your customer service team understand that in a wider context, or understand them in a wider context across your entire business, perhaps seeing they've got multiple products or accounts in numerous different domains, they can really help with any issues that may arise a lot quicker than they would have done otherwise. Operational efficiency is another key point, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to a frustration that I see play out in a lot of businesses, that they feel that nothing ever gets done. They feel that everyone spends all of their time writing reports or trying to rectify issues with their own data sets hidden away on local machines or personal spreadsheets. If you have that single view of truth that people can trust, it's going to eliminate a lot of those productivity issues and enable businesses to grow faster and with far less pain. It's now more important as well than ever to stay competitive in the current marketplace, and therefore you need to be able to say with absolute certainty that decisions you are making to drive the business forward are backed up by your data. If it's of poor quality, perhaps you can't even be sure who your top 10 customers are, how can you be confident that you're making the right decisions to keep you ahead of the competition? Being able to articulate the need for good quality data and a single view of truth that MDM provides, then linking that back to the potential for competitive advantage makes a really compelling case. We see the ability to leverage your organisation's data as an asset and regulatory compliance as two sides of the same coin. So having far more trustworthy data with an MDM system will allow you to make those better business decisions, but will also aid in your ability to demonstrate compliance with regulation. So be that GDPR or Basel II or BCBS 239, for example. If you know where your data has come from, how it is stored, and most importantly, that it's of good quality, the threat of non-compliance is mitigated drastically. A common theme that we see is that the why is being driven by IT rather than the business. So Historically, tech resources and by extension data would sit within the IT team's remit, but that's not the case anymore, and it's often unclear who's going to have ultimate control over a tech resource. So let's take the company marketing website as an example. So the website's a marketing asset, so ownership should therefore lie with the marketing team, you'd think. But it's also a complex piece of mission critical tech, so perhaps control should lie with the IT team. Both approaches here can be problematic. So on the one hand, if the marketing team needs to put in a request to the IT department every time they want to make a change to the website, then this can seriously impede marketing agility and customer responsiveness. On the other hand, giving marketing people unfettered access to the back end of the website can throw up some significant data security and governance issues that really need to be considered. So in relation to MDM, data is seen as an IT infrastructure problem rather than one for the business. Often, large companies attempt to implement multi-domain MDM projects in a single program. They may use the same technological platform, so IBM Infosphere or Informatica MDM, for example, to master a number of business-critical data entities across departments, business units, or functions. The technology chosen, however, doesn't answer the reasons why the organisation is embarking on an MDM initiative. The why is the business outcome that is expected from the program. So MDM projects should align to business objectives, and the technology and infrastructure solution is simply how you get there. Generally, we find there's a lack of clearly defined information management roadmap. We see organisations attempt a big bang approach, mastering numerous data domains across the entire organisation at once. So they'll attempt to integrate multiple silos without really considering what data should be within the scope of the programme and when. So to address that lack of a defined process, a philosophy that us here at Victor Davis are a huge advocate of is to think big and start small. So taking on a smaller data project that acts as a foundation for future growth and development that will allow you to build a framework that's scalable, agile, and delivers immediate business value. That being said, there isn't any point in starting with a domain that offers the lowest business value just because it's easy. If you can't prove that this has really changed the business in a positive way, it's still unlikely that senior management will buy into larger, more complex projects. So maybe your marketing team are concerned about consent management due to inconsistencies in their data sets, or there are concerns over staff productivity due to the proliferation of spreadsheets. So tackling these smaller issues with a thin slice approach allows you to drive business value quicker and demonstrate ROI far more easily than a traditional waterfall approach. So I'm sure there are plenty of people here that can attest to the notion that communication between business and IT isn't always the best. So our next point is highlighting that the lack of an effective communication strategy will seriously hamper any MDM initiative. So Victor Davis have conducted a series of interviews with data professionals and influence over the last few years, which we've called Data Change Makers. It's available on our website, so please do check it out. And I'd like to mention a point that one of our recent interviewees, Roberto Maranca, made. Now, he says that people are always talking about silos. However, he doesn't talk about silos anymore. He talks about tribes. A silo is a physical thing, and it'd be really easy to see the silos and maybe insert pipes between them. But unfortunately, in many companies, silos aren't visible. They're liquid, they're flexible, they're ethereal, and they're very real. So the groups of people that are guarding those silos are, their beliefs, their customs, their rituals, as Roberto says, are the people that you need to be targeting. So it's really less about the locations of the data you're trying to access, be that a legacy application or a spreadsheet. It's more about the people that own that particular data set and driving change through people and processes. Key stakeholders only tend to understand their own individual information requirements, which leads to a lack of cross-organisational understanding. So there has to be an adoption campaign company-wide, which grows through real champions of the data cause to affect positive change rather than enforcing policy changes or governance initiatives, which just sounds like a new form of policing within the business to those that aren't aware. Business users won't buy into any MDM projects if it's being forced down their throats with no real effort to communicate the benefits to them or to help them understand why you're embarking on this journey. So the lack of communication between IT and different business groups is exacerbated by the fact that these two groups tend to use separate tools for data management as well. So an ecosystem of vendors has grown up providing a range of different tools, and IT teams tend to invest in perhaps data catalogs or other similar tools, whereas the business tends to lean towards more visual tools designed for analytics or data governance. Typically, they're developed by separate software vendors and can't be integrated particularly easily, if at all. So it makes it even more difficult for the groups to collaborate. The issue of these separate tools combined with a silo mentality also means that there's very little or no common metadata, even when two teams are describing the same thing. So what's needed is a way to ensure that the tools and the definitions and terms used to describe the data are integrated and connected easily to facilitate working towards those common goals. So using the thin slice methodology, which I've already touched on and I'll come to a little bit more of later, allows you to map any of these adoption initiatives onto a business case that can actually unite the stakeholders and inform people outside of your core data champions or sponsors what your goal is and why it's going to matter to them. So in many organisations that we work with, there really is an insufficient mix of business and technical skills. So TDWI's Next Generation MDM report stated that 26% of organisations surveyed had attempted a homegrown MDM solution, while only 2% preferred that option in place of dedicated MDM tools. So often, such homegrown solutions were proof of concepts and now require scaling across the entire organisation. MDM solutions have, however, matured far beyond this into a comprehensive mix of data models, workflows, integration, authoring, stewardship, matching, linking, and survivorship. So it's questionable whether a homegrown solution could really meet all of these objectives effectively. Given their sizable investments within R&D, made possible, of course, by the fact that the solutions can be deployed with multiple customers, only enterprise-scale commercial solutions are likely to be effective long-term. So while these organisations were able to hand code an MDM silo, a number of them will find that they are unable to implement, govern and maintain MDM across the entire enterprise. So unless you have the right people in place with the required blend of technical skills and business understanding, your chances of successfully implementing your MDM strategy across the enterprise are negligible. Now, we've covered some of the reasons why MDM projects go wrong, so let's look at how we use our data delta approach to ensure success. So what is the data delta? So we see that there's a huge disconnect between all different types of data that exist across an organisation, and historically it was just in systems and applications. Now, we've added to that lots of unstructured data, emails, log files, a huge mass over the last few years, and it's become exponentially more complicated as time's gone on. Now, this is the data that you have, which is represented here on the left-hand side of this image. Then you have business people on the other side who don't really care what type of data you have. They just want the data that they need for their business function, which could be a sales team requiring how many customers have bought a certain product, or inquired about using your services, or marketing needing to know who's opted out of their mailing list, for example. All of them need data. They need it joined up, they need it trusted, and need to be able to consume it in a way that is meaningful for them. Also, more increasingly, to drive insights with analytics that they had, more so than they had in the past, because that's what their competitors are doing. So the data delta represents the gap between the two. So our response is to cross that delta. We've seen these problems so many times before across a myriad of different organisations. We've been through this for the last 30 years and seen what causes pain and, most importantly, how we can help alleviate it. So this is how the data delta method came about, and it's what we link every engagement back to, no matter what the scale. It's repeatable, durable, and most importantly, it's proven, which we've taken into huge multinational enterprises with incredibly complex data landscapes, right the way through to local councils and smaller businesses who perhaps just needed some pointers to help with GDPR compliance, for example. The point is that we see the same problems crop up time and time again in one guise or another, and this framework scales accordingly and allows us to help you solve them in a measurable and, most importantly, practical way. So it's built up over a series of 6 principles and 14 domains, which breaks it down into a high and detailed level. Our book, Crossing the Data Delta, articulates each point and the characteristics of each. So what are the benefits of doing them properly, the pain of doing it wrong, what success looks like, what we've seen work and when. So we reference case studies throughout the book, a couple of which I'll touch on in a moment. We'll tell you what the next steps are like. So if that brings in the practical element to help you apply these principles in your own data management initiatives. So when we talk about a thin slice approach and taking on a smaller project, we would reference across all these components. So you need a minimum standard for each of these to call any project that you do a success. We'd counter against the notion that you necessarily need a whole new data project to start using this. If there's a project that uses data in some way, then why not use that as a trial? Linking back to getting that C-level buy-in, this thin slice approach using the data delta is agile and drives immediate business value. So we pose the question, what is the earliest we can deliver value to keep everyone engaged? trying to solve everything in one go is very difficult, and it's more difficult to show true ROI with MDM. So we mentioned earlier that MDM is the enabler rather than a solution in of itself. So having that thin slice allows for an easier way to show that value. Executive buy-in is going to be far easier for these bigger projects if smaller projects can be shown to work. So just to bring some of what I've been saying to life, I've got a couple of brief case studies I wanted to share with you. So one of which is Camden, London Borough Camden Council. So like all of the UK local authorities, they're under constant pressure from central government to deliver cost savings, significant cost savings at that. So this is also in preparation for a budget cut of 50% last year. So Camden had to make at least £150 million in savings, whilst at the same time, the council aimed to drive its 5-year strategy for reducing inequality and whilst preserving the social mix. So looking at the big picture, Camden realised that neither its social objectives nor its savings targets could be met by one-off actions. It needed to find a way to drive continuous improvements in terms of service levels, operational processes, and cost efficiencies. So to solve the challenges, Camden decided to improve its operations by uniting previously siloed information and gaining a 360-degree view of how residents engage with its services. So they realised by adopting a systems thinking approach, it could help it ensure that residents who have registered their details with one service, so for example, housing, would not need to give the same information again to other services. Similarly, the council wanted to empower its own staff to work more efficiently by automatically gathering information from other departments. So this particular benefit of MDM would be especially valued for the council's electoral registration team, which had been fielding around 80 calls per day from other teams just to check residents' details. So as a first step, Camden needed to win the support of the data owners within its service teams. The next steps, according to one of its staff members, were running a privacy impact assessment. So this proved valuable to them, enabled them to weigh up the privacy concerns that all the business unit owners had, address them during the planning stage. So when they spoke to the services teams, they were able to very succinctly explain how the solution would keep their data safe and meet all the legal requirements. So after consulting with us here at Victor Davis, and there was a tender process alongside that, that resulted in the purchase of IBM Infosphere, Master Data Management. So Camden worked with ourselves and IBM business partners to develop and deploy the residence index, as they called it. So the implementation itself was completed in 3 months. Now, more than 300 personnel as of today across 35 council teams use the index to support their day-to-day activities. So it's served more than 65,000 inquiries, which has enabled the council to unlock cost efficiencies while driving continuous service improvements. So a really good example of this is police inquiries for information about residents. So this previously required one council officer to check up to 16 separate data sources, and thanks to the index, a single lookup that took an hour before can be completed in minutes. So it's been estimated by Camden that automated process alone contributes to around £60,000 of savings annually. So one way that MDM needs to be used as the enabler is looking how and questioning it and seeing where you can gain extra value. So after doing that initial thin slice project, they've then subsequently been able to identify single occupancy fraud, illegal instances of subletting, and substantial savings by minimising the instances of fraud and erroneous payments within the council. So they've asked questions of the MDM system and mapped clear business cases to it, so really driving value. Finally, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum to this, we're also working with a £60 billion pounds revenue global consumer goods organisation. So this was a global strategy engagement. It's led to implementation projects aimed at unifying competing views of customer and vendor. So the first team that was dispatched by us as part of this was deployed to the Philippines. It's moved to Brazil. So this has really been a truly global project, which has involved Informatica's MDM for vendor. So to finish up from me, we take on projects regardless of how big or small they are, and we can apply the same principles across both to really ensure that each project is set up for success. So that's the end for my part of the presentation, and I'm going to pass you back over to my colleague Guy, who is here to answer any questions.
Right, well, thank you very much for that, Tim. Extremely interesting and illuminating. So what questions have we got coming through the boards?
I've got a couple. One of the case studies there you said was it took 3 months. Is 3 months normal? How long does it normally take?
3 months, I think, would represent the happy path, but the whole drive that you'll see with Victor Davis when we're looking at assessing how to make a real big impact with a data initiative is if we can't show value within weeks or months, then there's something wrong with the initiative. The days of multi-million-pound MDM programs that drag on for years, and unless you're the largest of global organizations, those days have gone. Stakeholders want to see greater impact, and with the tools that are out there now, coupled with our experience, means you really can make a big splash in a short amount of time. It means people can see measurable benefits being enacted on site.
Okay. I've got a request here for a war story, basically. What's the worst project that you've walked into? But on the flip side of that, I'd quite like to hear what you did to fix it.
So I think one of the areas that we really add value is that we've been through this process many times. You'll have got the impression from the detail that Tim gave that we've been doing this for many years. Sometimes we encounter customers who've got preconceived ideas, and so working for a large professional services organisation, we asked about data quality. I mean, it was an MDM project, but MDM is a discipline that relies very much on the adjacencies. So we asked about data quality, and we provided with the data quality dashboard, and it was all green. And so the customer's viewpoint was they were fine to proceed with the MDM solution. Now, when we dug a little deeper, we looked at the quality in respect to how that was going to be used in MDM. We found there were some serious failings. Now, this particular customer didn't really like that news at the time, and it became a point where we had to really evidence our side of the argument. Now, in the end, they saw sense, they listened, and they set in train some remediation activities that fixed the DQ, that meant the MDM was on a platform of success rather than failure.
Okay, and you mentioned something there about budget at the high end. I've got a kind of, what's the normal budget that somebody should allocate for a project like this?
So there's an impossible question. I think if you're looking at the mid-tier of MDM vendors out there, the licenses are no longer in that multi-million pounds level that they may have been a few years ago. What we need to do is encourage organisations, encourage the vendors to embark on a proof of value or a proof of concept. So there are vendors out there, I won't mention specifically the names now, but they'll exact a 3 to 4 week proof of value program. Now, the sort of cost that they'll put into that might be £15,000 to £20,000, but they are confident with the quality of what they're able to implement for you that you'll see the value from that, and then you can plan a series of incremental projects, all in a similar sort of budget range, rather than embark on a big bang 7-figure implementation.
Okay, thank you. And this one's a question from me. What should people do next if they're interested?
Well, the very next thing they should do is reach out to Victor Davis. You can enter the Victor Davis community of MDM advocates, and we'll happily introduce you to other customers. We'll walk you through case studies and walk through the details of how we go about ensuring MDM success.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much for our speakers today. As we said, you will get a copy of the slides and the recording, which you can view at a later date and share with your colleagues. But thank you very much for attending this afternoon, and we hope you tune in for another event soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.